Identity Snatchers, Exposing a Korean Campus Bible Cult by Brian John Karcher. Dedication. For my beautiful and intelligent wife Mary. May this book help our processing of what happened to us as we begin a new life together. Acknowledgements. Zoe Hughes, the illustrator, is a former member of Minneapolis UBF. She was involved with UBF ministry for 7 years, from 2003 to 2010. After leaving, she was married and is continuing to recover. Her artwork was inspired by the theme for this book and mutually inspired the book's final refinements. Joseph Joe Schaefer is the former Penn State UBF chapter director and former senior staff member who spent nearly 30 years dedicated to the UBF ministry. He and his wife tried many ways and spent countless hours trying to communicate issues and solutions, to no avail. His 2010 survey letter is the best example of the current state of UBF. Joe's feedback was an incredible and instrumental part of constructing this book. Ben Tao, my unexpected friend, is currently a member of West Loop UBF Church, where he is an elder and the preaching pastor. His life and ministry are presented here as an example of how UBF ministry can possibly be redeemed. He and his wife have spent over 35 years at UBF, since 1980 and 1977 respectively, and have publicly repented and acknowledged the abuses that have happened. Brian, Wayne, Steve, Doug, Bill, Greg, George, John, and David, the 9 Christian pastors who talked with me, prayed with me, and shared with me after leaving the UBF group. One of them baptized me with the words, "You are now free from the teachings of one man." Their online discussions, in-person meetings, and hours of sermons helped me to see what genuine, Orthodox Christianity is all about. Their teachings, although from many different denominations, stand in stark contrast to the theology I have learned at UBF. Endorsements. This book is part of a critical examination of University Bible Fellowship. It gives insight into the structures and methods of this controversial group that's work is focused on students. Dr. Reinhard Hempelmann, director of the Protestant Center of Religious and Ideological Issues, Berlin, Germany. I'm really glad to know of your book project. It is greatly needed. I don't know of any books that cover University Bible Fellowship in depth. Larry Pyle, counselor at Wellspring Retreat and Counseling Center, Athens, Ohio, USA. Amen. This book is needed. I pray God uses it to bring liberation to those still trapped in UBF and healing to families and the body of Christ. Former member. I think the book is so important to show that processing UBF is not just about criticizing them mainly, but about becoming happy, healthy, and whole again. Former member. Forward. I am truly grateful to receive the following 2 introductions for my book. Forward by Ben Tao. Brian is a tireless and very hard worker, especially for UBF conferences. He is also the most passionate, zealous, and outspoken defender of UBF. This is what I heard about Brian Karcher during the 2 decades plus that he was in UBF, though I never knew him personally. My interaction with him began online when he started posting on ubfriends.org. Soon after that, in 2012, we finally met up. We have chatted for hours on numerous occasions when he visited me and Wesley BBF in Chicago several times, when we were part of a 6-month cohort hosted by Dr. John Armstrong, and when we drove together from Chicago to Minneapolis and back to attend a John Piper conference. Upon first meeting him, I was rather surprised that Brian is a gentle, soft-spoken, and mild-mannered gentleman. This is because when I read his blogs and comments online, I expected him to be a rough, overly aggressive, bombastic, argumentative, and a somewhat intimidating and, quote, in-your-face, end quote, sort of person. But to my pleasant surprise, in person Brian is the very opposite of what I expected. More importantly, Brian is a genuine and sincere Christian, as well as a man of integrity and honesty. He is also a friend of whom I trust. I am sorry when I hear some people denounce him as being bitter, angry, negative, ungrateful, and even demonic, simply because he left UBF and because of what he writes about UBF. I am also sorry that some people in UBF refuse to hear him or correspond with him, and they wish to have nothing to do with him, even though he was fully committed and devoted to UBF for 24 years. Brian and I do not agree about some things. We have had some rather intense but friendly and amicable exchanges. Despite our differences, I can vouch that what he writes is real and authentic. This book is Brian's account of what he encountered and experienced in UBF during the 24 years that he was in UBF, and since he left UBF in 2011. This book is Brian's story. It deserves to be heard and read. Forward by John Schaefer. My apologies. Forward by Joe Schaefer. In the spring of 2011, one of the staunchest online supporters of University Bible Fellowship went silent. By midsummer, he resigned as the director of Detroit UBF. By the end of the year, he took his place among the long list of former members who seemed to have nothing good to say about the organization. How could Brian Carter change so quickly? And which Brian should we believe? The unwavering apologist who sang the praises of UBF, or the passionate whistleblower who airs his dirty laundry? There's only one Brian. He went missing for a long time, but now he's returned to tell us what happened, and his story is not isolated. Brian was a victim of spiritual identity theft. An organization tried to erase his Brian-ness and replace it with a false religious self. Under the guise of doing the Lord's work, UBF colonized his life story and molded him to fit its unusual ideas of what a Christian disciple ought to be. In 2011, the real Brian resurfaced and began the long, painful process of recovering his stolen identity. The decades he spent in UBF were an extended interlude of role-playing, a long detour on his road to differentiated adulthood. In the mid-1980s, I was sitting in the so-called Bible House near the campus of the University of Maryland. In the next room, a Korean missionary was coaching an American undergrad on how to revise the life testimony he had written to share at an upcoming UBF conference. The missionary wanted the testimony to follow the standard format that every UBF audience has come to expect. Before the student met Jesus, translation, before he entered UBF, he was a wandering, fatalistic sinner with no personal relationship to God. When he met Jesus through the UBF Bible study, he discovered God's hope and direction to become a lifelong UBF-style disciple maker. To the missionary's jargon, however, the student was not complying. He argued with the missionary, saying, "That's not true. That's not how it happened." But that missionary was unrelenting. With a voice that was soft but firm, he insisted that the UBF version was the true story of this man's life, and he had countless Bible verses to prove it. After an hour or more of this treatment, the student finally broke down and agreed to revise his life testimony to fit the UBF mold. In UBF, a young man like this discovers a strange new world that is more intense than a typical Christian fellowship. A place where he is warmly greeted and served. A home that makes him feel important, part of something exciting and great. A shelter from ambiguity where choices are clear and beliefs are absolute. And a social pressure cooker that channels his faith and longing for community into a sequence of life-changing decisions about studies, career, finances, marriage, and family. UBF invites you to study the Bible, but it wants to cement your lifetime commitment to the organization. Its esoteric mindset and lifestyle that insiders refer to as quote-unquote mission. For most members, the story does not end well. After months, years, or decades of trying to make the mission thing work, they gradually realize that they are not and cannot be the people that UBF expects them to be. Craving authenticity, they start to become honest about what they think and feel. Questions are asked, shunning begins, disillusionment creeps in, relationships turn sour, and the story falls apart. This crumbling of the UBF identity is not experienced by everyone in the same way or to the same degree. Some can find safe space in the organization where they are, to an extent, free to be themselves, hidden from the watchful eyes of leaders who would clamp down on them. Kids who grew up in UBF are often shielded from the aggressive discipleship techniques that their parents inflict on other people's children. And oddly enough, some people don't seem to mind having their identity stolen. For whatever reason, they are relieved to allow someone else to chart their courses and write their life scripts. God bless those people. I wish them well. Yes, some will rate their UBF experience as positive. But that does not discredit what Brian says. The things he writes about did happen, and the stories must be told. The subtitle of this book, Exposing a Korean Campus Bible Cult, will cause many UBF leaders and members to become upset. They really hate it when you drop the C-bomb. For decades, the organization has been hounded by tales of authoritarian abuse, manipulation, cover-up, and deceit. The stories are extensive and well documented. Everyone knows of them. In private conversation, many of the top leaders of UBF will admit that these stories are true, yet they maintain that the problems are not very serious. And as a public matter, University Bible Fellowship has never demonstrated any remorse or admitted any wrongdoing. To curious readers, I say this: the stories Brian presents here are not exaggerated. They are accurate retrospective reports of what former members saw and experienced. I witnessed many of these things personally. To current UBF leaders and members, I say this: the cult label is not something that Brian drummed up. It's something that you earn by decades of boorish behavior. When any organization does the things that you do, the outside world will call it a cult. Instead of complaining, I suggest you deal with it. And that concludes the Identity Snatchers Prologue. Next time, Identity Snatchers Introduction.